Hey there, welcome to a guide on how to roll up your first level 1 character in the Stormlight role-playing game, more commonly named the Cosmere role-playing game. For this guide, some of the later level content will be redacted out of the Stormlight handbook. This is actually for a campaign that's being run by a friend of mine where he'd like to keep some of the world details secret for now. That will likely come up later on. So some things will be redacted, but those things that are redacted don't really affect level 1 builds at all. So with all that said, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write down a player name here. Let's just go with Howdy. And you're going to write a character name. Our character's name will be Doug. I'm not sure why it's Doug, but it's Doug. He's level 1, and we will be rolling up a human character. So, just to that point, the first thing you would do is you would go to the origin, specifically the ancestry on page 30, and there you would select your option, either a human or perhaps something else that might be redacted from this version. In any case, since we're playing a human, that makes it easy enough for us. You'll see if you go to that page that humans get an extra talent. So once we select a path, we will get an extra talent for being a human. Next, my recommendation, I go a bit out of order. So there's a character creation in the character creation guide here, but I think it's a little confusing and bounces around a bit much, and it doesn't give you the most high impact decisions first, which I think is helpful for thinking about how to design a character. So we're going to go a little out of order from how the book recommends doing things. With that having been said, the next step we're going to do is selecting a path. So your path is essentially your class. For the purposes of this guide, I'm going to relate things to D&D 5th edition because that's the most popular role-playing game right now, and a lot of the audience will have familiarity with it. But if you haven't played 5e, then it should be easy enough to figure out anyway. So, looking at the paths, there are 5 options. There are envoys, agents, hunters, leaders, 6 options, scholars, and warriors. And for each of these 6 options, there are 3 subpaths for a total of 18 heroic subpaths. So we're going to just pick one of those. Technically speaking, as a level 1 human, when you want to go into a path for any character, the first thing you have to do is you have to take the key talent of that path. So you would either have to take the agent key talent, the envoy key talent, so on and so forth. Once you've taken that key talent, then you can proceed through one of the, or any number of the sub-path trees. So for example, as a level 1 human, since you get 2 talents instead of 1, you could take the agent key talent and one of the agent talents from one of the 3 subpaths. Or you can take 2 key talents. Now, my recommendation is, when in doubt, just take a key talent and one of the talents within a subpath of that path. So take, for example, the hunter key talent and one of the talents in the assassin subpath, for example. But for this character, let's go ahead and let's make something a little bit on the basic but still fun side. Let's go with, how about a warrior build? So we're going to want to go down towards the end. It's on page 114. The pages on this PDF are a little off because a lot of pages have been redacted, but we will find page 114 soon enough. Just hold with me. Also, you have the advantage where you can skip through the video to figure out when I figured this out. So there we go. Okay, so the Vigilant Stance is the warrior key. So what I would do here is I would write down, since I want to be a warrior, I would write down Vigilant Stance, and that's page 115. Instead of copying all of this detail, I just put it here. And then I would also add whichever talent I want. So because I am a warrior, which we'll write that down here, warrior, that means that since I now have taken this talent, I as a human get 1 more talent, and I can take the first one, which is either this one or this one, and any of these 3 trees that fall under the warrior path. For players in my friend's campaign, please disregard the shard bearer path. That is, frankly, at this point, that should have been redacted, but it wasn't because I didn't realize. It's something that came up later, but just ignore shard bearer for now. In any case, so our options in this case would be duelist, and we could take practiced kata or flame stance. Or we could go soldier, and we could go with cautious advance, or we could go with combat training. We're going to go ahead and go with combat training. I think that's a very strong and very well-rounded ability. So what I like to do is I put soldier in parentheses because that's the subpath. You don't technically have to do it. I just find it helpful. And I'm going to write that we took the combat training talents. And that is on page... Well, there's no page number on that one. 117. Okay. All right, congratulations. You have made the biggest decision to start out your build, which is selecting those talents. The next thing that I like to do from this point is I like to go, and this is really counterintuitive to players of 5e, but I think this makes a huge difference in this system. I like to go to equipment next, which again, in most other systems, I would not use that as the second thing I'm doing during character creation. But here, level 1 equipment choice has a big impact on early play, especially at level 1, and future levels will depend on your game master and how much they allow you to get improved equipment over time. So we're going to go to page 256 for equipment. And we will go from there. This is page 310, so it'll be somewhere around here. Actually, I wonder if those page numbers in the corner are searchable. If they are, this will be easier than I thought it was. Perfect. That makes my life much easier. Okay, great. So within the equipment, there is starting kits, which those are on page 243. So you select one of these starting kits. For our purposes, we're going to skip the prisoner kit. If you're not in this campaign, please just look into your Stormlight handbook and read what that says. For us, speak with your GM if you're interested in the prisoner kit. Essentially, you get nothing but manacles and ragged clothing, and you get some secret prize that you should talk to the GM about. For everyone else, you can just read what exactly it is. For us, though, that leaves us with 5 other options to pick with. And between these options, the main thing that you want to be thinking about, I would say, is your weapon and or armor of choice. Because not all of these kits give you decent weaponry. Now, the ones that don't give you something to make up for it. So, for example, there's 2 different types of weapons in the system. There are light weapons, and there are heavy weapons. Heavy weapons use your strength ability score. Light weapons use your speed ability score. As a general rule, you can think of speed like dexterity in a system like 5e. This is a little different from 5e and a lot of other systems because longbows and crossbows are included in the heavy weaponry, which means you can play a ranged character that is strength-based, and in fact, your maximum damage, at least from basic shots, is likely to be higher. However, on the other side, there are some other advantages to going speed instead, and so you can also play a ranged character using a short bow. And the same is true with melee weapons. You could play a speed-based melee character using a javelin or a knife or a mace or a rapier, a short spear, a side sword, so on and so forth, or you could do the same thing with heavy weapons. Real quick, let's talk about how to make proper use of the fact that you, as a human or any other core race in this system, have 2 hands. So you can either use a 2-handed weapon, or you could carry a 1-handed weapon in one hand and a shield in the other, which has the defensive trait. What that defensive trait does is it allows you to take the brace action without cover nearby, which allows you to essentially gain the benefit of cover without said cover. Give me just one moment. I need to prevent my cat from killing himself by eating string from balloons. I'll be right back. I have returned. Okay. So, right. So you can use the defensive ability if you have a shield. So there you would use a 1-handed weapon in one hand and a shield with defensive in the other to allow you to use the brace action to give you a little bit more survivability. The third option is to dual wield, to carry one weapon in each hand. So to do that, you would have, say, a knife in one hand and a knife in the other. Now, you don't necessarily need the offhand trait to dual wield weapons. You can dual wield, for example, any two one-handed weapons, even if they don't have the offhand. Let's find a good example. Not poleaxe. Sorry, that is two-handed. Two shields, that would be funny. You actually can attack with two shields. Or two axes is a great example. Oh, that is offhand. Are there any one-handed weapons that don't have offhand? Here we go. You can, a little funny. You can dual wield javelins, or you can dual wield maces. So when you're dual wielding weapons without the offhand trait, your first attack with your right hand is going to cost one action, or left-handed if you're left-handed. Even if you're ambidextrous, you're forced to choose which one is your primary hand. Your attack with your offhand usually would cost two actions. And in this system, the way it works is when you start a combat, you will select whether you're taking a fast turn or a slow turn. There are only 4 real turns in initiative. There is players fast, so all players who picked a fast turn go first, and you can all go at the same time in whatever order you want. Then there's enemies fast, then there's players slow, and there's enemies slow. And you might be thinking, well, why would I not just pick players fast every single time that would just mean I get to go faster? Well, the reason you might pick slow is when you take a fast turn, you only get 2 actions, and when you take a slow turn, you get 3 actions. And so you make a strategic trade-off, and you can change that every round. So one way you might think about that is early on in the combat, you might take slow turns, and then later on in the combat, you might take fast turns so that you get the most total actions possible. That would be one strategic choice. Another strategic choice would be, let's go fast right out the gate because we want to knock out their big guys to decrease their damage output, right? There's lots of strategic decisions you could make. But if you have a slow turn and you have 3 actions and you don't need to use one of those to move, you could use your first action to attack with your main hand and your second and third, because the offhand requires 2 actions, to attack with the offhand. What the offhand expert trait does is it allows you to attack with your offhand as a single action instead of as 2 actions. So essentially, if you have the offhand trait, which if it's under traits, then you get it automatically just using the weapon. If it's under expert traits, then you have to have expertise in that weapon, which we'll talk about later, in order to benefit from anything in this expert traits column. But essentially, you can carry 2 weapons as long as they're not two-handed. You can attack with the main one as an action, the offhand as 2 actions. Unless it has the offhand ability, then it is a single action. Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and make a strength-based build in this case. And so because of that, we want heavy weapons, because heavy weapons use strength. And so we're going to look for something here that gives us decent heavy weapons. So here the courtier kit gives, and I might be mispronouncing that, gives a side sword, a great sword, a long sword, or a longbow. That would be a great option. The military kit gives 2 non-special weapons. That can include heavy weapons, so we're very happy with that. Artisan kit is hammer or light weapon. We don't want that in this build. Underworld kit is 2 light weapons. We don't want that. And academic kit is a selection of 3 different light weapons. We don't want that. So since we're going for a heavy weapon build, really our only options, if we want to have a heavy weapon at level 1, are the military kit and the courtier kit. Now, the courtier kit doesn't give us any armor. Instead, it gives us a patron. I don't want to go into detail right now, but think of a patron as like a rich person who is sort of backing you, who is giving you financial and social assistance in your endeavors. So we can have that, or we could have the ability to not die on the battlefield because we have armor. In this case, we're going to go with not dying. That doesn't actually imply this is better. Anyway, either one's fine. But we're going to go with the military kit. So I am just going to copy everything from the military kit and stick it under armor and equipment. There we go. And then I'm going to take the weapons specifically, and I'm going to move them up here. Now, there are a few things that have selections in here. So you get both the uniform and the chain armor, so that's great. For the 2 non-special weapons, we're going to come back to the heavy weaponry tree table. You could go with light weaponry, but we're going to go heavy because we're going strength-based. And then we are going to select, you know what, let's make a long spear build. That could be fun. So we're going to go with a long spear as our main weapon of choice, and when things are far away, we're going to take a longbow. You don't have to have ammunition in this system, assuming it's not special ammunition like poisoned or, perhaps there's magic in this system. If it's not poisoned or like magical ammunition, then you would use just regular ammunition, which is free, and it's assumed your character would have it. You don't need to track it. So we have a long spear and a longbow. Great. Now that we have selected our equipment, the next thing I like to do is I like to go ahead and pick our attributes. Since we've chosen to go with heavy weapons, that means we need strength. So when you pick your attributes, you get out of these 6 attributes, which we'll just go full screen for a moment, you get 12 points to spend. And every attribute has to be a value between 0 and 3 inclusive. So for example, you could go 3, 3, 3, 3, 0, 0, because that adds up to 12, but that would be pretty extreme. You can also do any combinations of 0s, 1s, 2s, and 3s that adds up to 12. So we are going to go 3 for strength. Speed is going to affect our movement speed and also our physical defense. And since we're playing a warrior, a soldier, we want to be strong in battle, that physical defense stat's going to be very important to us, as is our movement speed. So we're going to go ahead and put a 3 in that as well. Not necessary, a 1 or a 2 would have been fine, but we're going to go with 3. Then the next thing I recommend, when you look at spiritual defense, or the spiritual stats, which are awareness and presence, I can't give away why to my players yet, but I would strongly encourage you to have one of these 2 numbers be a 3. At least a 2, bare minimum 2, but I would encourage you to have one of them be a 3. And it can be 3 and 0, but just make sure one of them is strong, because that might come up later. In this case, I think we're going to go ahead and give him a 3 in awareness and a 0 in presence. Because Doug, he's not a persuasive guy, but he's got to keep his head on a swivel on the battlefield. That gives us 3 more points because there's 12 total points. And we're going to split those up between intellect and willpower. In our case, because we want to have a fair amount of focus, which is based on willpower, we're going to give a 2 to willpower and a 1 to intellect. Just really briefly, what do all these numbers affect? Strength affects heavy weapons and carrying capacity and health. The effect of strength on health is very low compared to the effect of constitution on health in 5e. In 5e, you apply constitution every single level, and so if you don't have a decent con, you won't have much health. In this system, you gain a flat amount of health every level, and strength is only applied at levels 1, 6, and I think like 11 and a couple of other late levels. So the vast majority of levels, you're getting a flat health number no matter what, so don't worry too much about this, but strength does affect health. Speed affects light weapons and also your movement speed. Intellect affects the number of expertises we will get later. Willpower affects your focus, which is a resource sort of like mana in some systems, except it's not magical. It's just used to show how focused your character is and to allow them to do certain maneuvers. Awareness affects your senses range, and presence affects your social capacity. On top of the fact of all of these abilities, of course, affecting your skills down here. So now that we've selected these ability scores, we're going to calculate our defenses. Strength, for each defense, it is 10 plus these 2 numbers, plus the 2 numbers next to it. So for strength, it's 10 plus 3 plus 3, that's 16. For the cognitive defense, it is 10 plus 1 plus 2, that's 13. And for the spiritual defense, it's 10 plus 3 plus 0, which is also 13. Our health maximum is going to be 10 at first level plus our strength. That is true of all level 1 characters. So just 10 plus strength. In this case, that is 13. Our current health will, of course, be equal to our maximum health. And then I don't have the page open, but this is on the armor table earlier. Your deflect is listed next to whatever armor you have. Because we have chain armor, we have a deflect of 2. Really briefly, the 3 options at level 1 are chain armor, leather armor, and uniform. Uniform has 0 deflect, leather armor has 1, chain armor has 2. What deflect does is it doesn't affect any of your defenses. It doesn't make you harder to hit. Instead, it makes it so that when you get hit, it hurts less. So if I get hit for 5 damage and I have a deflect of 2, I will only take 3 damage. Your deflect subtracts away from the damage you would otherwise take. Assuming, I don't actually remember off the top of my head whether deflect applies to cognitive and spiritual defense? I don't think it does. I think it only applies to physical defense, but feel free to double check me on that. Then we will calculate our focus. It is equal to 2 plus willpower. So in this case, 4. And our current focus will, of course, be our maximum focus. Investiture is 0. For a level 1 character, investiture is always 0. Now, you might be asking, what's investiture? To which my answer is, if you're playing in this campaign, it's a secret. If you're not playing in this campaign, I encourage you to use the magic of Control F in the Stormbook Handbook and type in the word investiture, and it will answer that question. Our current investiture, of course, is also 0. Okay, great. Now we're going to go to lifting capacity. So to find these numbers, the way you're going to do it is you're going to go to attributes on page 48. So here we are. Here we have the lifting and carrying table. It shows the lifting capacity for a 3 strength character is 500 pounds. We will write that right here. We will scroll down to speed, and we can see here is our movement rate. For a 3 speed character, our speed is 30 feet per action. So movement, 30. Next, we'll go to our recovery die. For a 2 willpower character, the recovery die is 1d6. And that's used during, I don't know if they call them short rests in the system, they might, but essentially during short rests, you recover an amount of health based on your recovery die. And also various healing mechanisms in the system, like if you have a surgeon in your party who's healing you, those healing numbers will usually be based off of your recovery die as well. So it's helpful to have a good willpower in order to get healed effectively. Next, awareness affects your sensing range, which is how far away you can easily perceive things. And so our sensing range as a 3 awareness character is going to be 20 feet. That covers all of these base values that need to be filled in from our attributes. We will next calculate our ability skill, our skill. Sorry, we're going to calculate skills now. So the first thing we should do is we should go back to warrior, and we should see what skill we get for free, because every heroic path comes with 1 free skill. So go with me to page 114. Actually, we should Control F that because I am Controlling Fing it. There we go. Okay. Scroll out. We're going all over the place. Here we are. Scrolling down, and here we are. Here it is. Starting skill, athletics. So we get 1 rank in athletics. As a level 1 character, you cannot have more than 2 ranks in any of these skills. You get up to 4 ranks in addition to the 1 free rank you get from your key talent. So we are going to prioritize things that would be helpful to Doug on the battlefield. Of course, he has to have a high perception. He doesn't want to miss anything. So we're going to put 2 of those 4 ranks in perception. Then we're also going to give him 1 rank. Oh, actually, we're just going to give him 1 rank in perception. I forgot to mention, it's incredibly important for most builds that you put 2 points in either heavy weapons or light weapons. This is not true of all builds, but if you're using a build where you're going to be attacking with a weapon on the reg, you probably want to have your skill for that weapon maxed out. So since you can't exceed 2 skill points in any skill at level 1, we're going to want 2 points in heavy weapons. That takes up 2 of our 4 points. We put 1 more in perception, and we will put the last point in, let's go with deduction. I've always been a big fan of deduction in this system because deduction can be used, actually any skill can be used, but deduction is probably the easiest to use, to gain advantage in combat. You just deduce a weakness about your opponent, you figure it out. If you make a check against their appropriate defense, then you have advantage against them on your next action. So I really like using deduction for that purpose. But that's our 4 skills. We got 1 for free, and then we chose 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we will calculate the actual skills. This is very simple. You just look at the attribute that is in parentheses. You take that number, you add the number of ranks. So for speed, that's a 3 for everything that has speed next to it, unless we have ranks in that, which we don't have ranks in any of the speed skills. Next, for strength, that's a 3 plus these. So for athletics, that's a 4, and for heavy weapons, that's a 5, because 3 plus 1 and 3 plus 2. Next, for all of the intelligence ones, we have a 1, and for all of the willpower ones, we have a 2. Finally, for all of the presence ones, we have a 0, and for all of the survival skills, we have a 3. The way you make any skill check in the system, for the most part, is you roll a d20 and you add your skill modifier. Very simple. So let's say Doug wants to steal something. He wants to pick someone's pocket. He would roll a d20 and he would add 3 because that is his thievery score. A little different from a system like 5e, weapon skills are included as skills. So making a weapon attack is just a skill check like any other skill check would be. You roll a d20, you add 5. Easy enough. The one difference from a system like D&D is the weapon die is rolled at the same time as the attack roll die. So you would actually roll a d20, and you would also roll the the damage for a long spear, which I actually don't remember what that is. I think it's it's either d8 or d6, but I think it's a d8. Let's find it. Yep. So if I were attacking with my long spear, or if Doug were, he would roll a d20 and a d8, and he might roll the plot die. We'll talk about that in a moment. Rolling that, he would see the result of d20. Let's say it's a 10. He would take that 10 and he would add 5. That's a 15 to hit. Then he would look at the damage. It would be the result of the d8 plus, again, his heavy weapon skill. So in this, or is it just strength mod? Okay. So this is a one-pager that I use for the system. There was different content here that related to the redacted content, and I added a few more things that I think are helpful. So when you attack, the damage is damage die plus skill. So it would be that d8 plus 5 for Doug. Let's say you got a 3, he'd deal 8 damage. The other thing he would also roll is if the stakes were raised, he would roll a plot die. In situations that are particularly impactful to the plot or just seem really important or tense, you can roll the plot die. When you do that, it's rolled at the same time as the d20, the skill check, and the result tells you whether or not something crazy happens. So a normal plot die will have these sides at the bottom, but if you don't own an actual plot die, you can just use a d6 and it converts to these values at the bottom. A 3 or a 4 on a normal d6 would not do anything. These sides just mean the plot die has no effect. If you get a 5 or a 6, you get an opportunity. An opportunity allows you to do one of the things down here. You can aid an ally, which means the next test made by an ally of your choice gains advantage. You can collect yourself to recover 1 focus. You can just decide you get a critical hit, or you can influence the narrative. You also automatically get an opportunity if you roll a nat 20 on a skill check. When you influence the narrative, it could be something like they drop their weapon, or we get reinforcements that arrive, or I find a helpful weapon on the ground, or something like that. It's just a thing that affects the narrative that is useful and good for you. If you roll this 1 or a 2, you get this little red thingy. That's called a complication. That also happens on a nat 1. When you are facing a complication, one of 3 things happens. You either hinder an ally, which means the next test taken by a PC, a player character, gains disadvantage. You become distracted, which means you lose 1 focus, or you influence the narrative, which means the PC's actions result in a negative plot twist. In this case, maybe you trip and fall prone. You drop your weapon, your bowstring breaks, and you need to get it fixed. In fact, you can fix it yourself, but it'll take you a few minutes out of combat, and you can't do that right now. Something like that. Something that's usually minor, but still inconvenient and bad. But this system is nice to its players. And so while the opportunities just give you an opportunity, the complications give you a boost to your d20 roll. So if you roll this number on the plot die, it's a 1, or just this 2 in a circle on the plot die, then you do get a complication, which is bad, but you also get a boost of 2 to your attack roll. So in the previous example, Doug rolled a d20, he got a 10. That is a 15 to hit because he's got a +5 with heavy weapons. He would actually have a 17 to hit because he would get this extra 2 from getting a complication. So Doug would likely hit his opponent and deal some damage, but at the same time, Doug would face a complication. So he might hit them, but on the fall, he might, twist his ankle and get an extremely minor injury from that. Or he might hit them and he might drop his weapon on the follow-through. Right, something like that. The same thing, if you get this value, you add a +4. So here, if Doug had rolled a 14, he would have a total of a 19 to hit. Okay, so that covers the basics of how rolling to hit works in the Cosmere RPG system, and rolling other skill checks and the plot die and all that kind of thing. Let's talk next about our expertises, and we are nearing the end of character creation here for a level 1 character. For our expertises, you automatically get 2 expertises from your culture. So let's go ahead and select our culture. Going to page 3, the culture is on page 38. Okay, so you're going to select 2 of these cultures, like Alethi, for example. You can read about these cultures if you like. They're just essentially cultures of various nations and people groups throughout Roshar, which is the world in which the system takes place. We will just go with Aleshi and let's just go with her Dazian. So Doug has expertise in Alethi and her Dazian. That just means that Doug really knows those cultures. It explains what exactly this does. So for Alethi, he knows the names, locations, and high princes of each princedom within Alethkar. He can choose a princedom that his character has lived in. He can replicate its regional dialect, and he knows its vendors, public organizations, noteworthy landmarks. He chooses how proficient he is in Alethi, reading, writing glyphs, as well as literacy in women's script. Regardless of your religious beliefs, you're familiar with the basic tenets of Vorinism, the Almighty, and the Heralds. For Herdazian, he's going to get all of this stuff, which we're not going to go through now. But that's the basics of those cultural expertises. You get 2, which demonstrate what people groups your character has interacted with most in the past, and you know what a person would know about if he knew a lot about those people groups. In addition to those, you get a number of additional expertises equal to your intellect score. So for Doug, let's actually go back to that weapon table. So I will talk more. Actually, let's talk about it now. So for expertises, you can pick pretty much anything you want. One thing that I really like to consider is if you're trying to build a combat-focused character, which this character is, you really want to look at, not necessarily choose, but at least look at the expertises for your weapons that you use and for your armor, because there are certain mechanical bonuses you can get from those expertises. Outside of those more mechanical expertises for weapons and armor, you can also take expertises for just anything that your person could be an expert at. So for example, you could be an expert in botany, or you could be an expert in a certain religion in this world. For example, Vorinism. Or you could be an expert in, leatherworking, or be a blacksmith, or in making poisons, or in singing, or in dancing, right? That pretty much anything that your character could be good at, you could have an expertise in. The way that the game master is supposed to use these expertises is the broader the expertise is, the less helpful it is when it comes up. So as an example, let's say that I have expertise in religion, okay? And there's some detail about Vorinism that's really specific and niche and not many people would know about, okay? You might have a situation where players without expertise in religion or Vorinism don't even get to make the check, because there's no way that just some random person would know this. Or maybe they make the check with disadvantage. Then the person with expertise in religion would get the opportunity to just make the check normally instead of being at disadvantage or not getting to it all. There's a chance they've heard of this specific detail because they're experts in religion. Then, the character with expertise in Vorinism might get to make the check with advantage. Because they're an expert in this area, of course they know most of it, right? Or, in some cases, they might just get to know the thing without making a check at all. Similarly, let's say you're trying to dance in front of people. If you have expertise in dancing, then you probably get advantage on performing in front of people in that way. So on and so forth. Anything you can think of, you can stick in the expertise slot, and the way that it gets balanced in the system is the broader it is, so the more often it's going to come up, the weaker its effect will be. And that's up to the DM. It's a very soft mechanic. But the broader it is, the weaker the effect is. The narrower it is when it comes up, the more you're rewarded for the fact that this is a super narrow thing that you're good at, and it came up, so let's have your character shine. Right. Okay. In Doug's case, because Doug is Min Maximus, the unstoppable warrior, we are going to go to weapons on page 243, and we're going to see if his long spear has an expertise that we would like to take. Okay, here we are. So for a long spear, the expert trait is defensive, which we've looked at before. That allows you to brace to get a boost to your defenses without cover. In Doug's case, that's actually very strong. So that's a strong candidate for what we might want to choose. That essentially is the equivalent of if he had a shield up. In a lot of ways, you can make an offhand attack with a shield, so I guess it doesn't have that element to it, but it's still really strong. The other thing we want to look at is the expert trait for chain armor. In Doug's case, so for these heavy armors, if you don't have a strength of 10, or if you don't have a strength equal to the cumbersome value here, then you get a whole bunch of bad effects. You're slow to while wearing the armor, and you gain disadvantage on all tests that use your speed attribute. You probably don't want to deal with that. If you have a strength less than 3, then taking expertise in chain armor, so you can use chain armor, might be a decent call. In Doug's case, he doesn't need it. He's already got a strength of 3. So for that reason, Doug is going to go ahead and take expertise in his long spear, which gives it the defensive trait. Perfect. So since Doug has taken his 2 cultural expertises and a number of additional expertises equal to his intellect, Doug is done adding expertises. Good for Doug. Doug doesn't have any conditions or injuries. We've added all the attributes. We've filled in everything at the top and down here. The only things left to do now are to add notes about Doug's purpose, his obstacle, his goals, his connections, notes we might have about him, and his character appearance. I'm not going to go in great detail about this because I think this really gets at your character design. And I would encourage you, if you're rolling up a character in the system, to definitely have a goal, because goals have mechanical effects in the system sometimes. The one you come up with at the beginning might not, but I can almost guarantee, based off some elements in this world, that there will be goals that come up later that use this sort of 3 check mark system, where you try to accomplish the goal 3 times or in 3 stages. In any case, that may or may not be how your particular goal works, but let's go ahead and look at purpose, obstacle, and goals just to get the basics of that for character creation. So we'll talk about goals first. Your character goal, essentially, these are some example goals. It might be something like become a noble, or find a missing person, or fulfill a specific oath, or repay a debt of gratitude, or get revenge. Doug, he's out for revenge. There was some guy in a battle who killed his best friend. We're trying to find that dude. His name's Eric. Doug's got to take down Eric. So I'm actually going to write that down. I don't want to forget about Eric. Never forget. You can take 1 or 2 goals. Talk to your GM. You may be able to take more if you have a reason to. But they're helpful to thinking through your character's motivations. Your purpose is your core need. Doug is trying really hard to, you know what? he wants to save others. Doug doesn't want what happened to his old friend that was killed by evil Eric to happen again, so he's trying to protect and save others. And his biggest obstacle is self-doubt. After watching his friend die, Doug just doesn't know if he can do this anymore. Like, Doug, is he strong enough to defend his friends? Who knows? You can choose anything you want. Don't feel like you have to choose from these examples, but since we're trying to go fast, I went ahead and did that. Rest of this is just soft details, connections. You usually won't have any at the beginning of the campaign, but you might. There are some ways to gain them. For example, I think the courtier equipment set that we talked about earlier, having a patron, I believe, counts as a connection. So there are some ways to get them at level 1, but usually you won't have one. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like, go ahead and screenshot using the snipping tool in Microsoft Windows. This one-pager, it'll be useful while you play to give you some of the details for how combat works in a fast and digestible way. If you don't know how to use the snipping tool, press Windows, type SNIP, and there you go. That's the snipping tool. You'll click New, you go like that, and you will have snipped whatever you highlighted. But hopefully that's helpful. For the Stormlight Handbook, please pay for it, people. That's a generally good idea. The players in this campaign are going to get this redacted version because they aren't supposed to see certain details. But outside of that context, pay for things. Brandon Sanderson did a good job with this. For the character sheets, you can find that online for free. I believe it's on the Cosmere RPG's website. And for our group, we have this shared in the Discord. All right, thank you very much for watching, and life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Have a great day.